Welcome to the City of Salem's Human Rights Commission. Till 3 p.m.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Robert Marshall. I'm the chair of the Salem Human Rights Commission. Just as a reminder for everybody joining us virtually or in the gallery, that our meetings are recorded and broadcasted live to YouTube. We'll go ahead and get started with just a quick round of introductions, and then we'll proceed with the agenda. So we'll start with Haley, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Haley Berenbaum. I live, I think, in Ward 7. I always forget if it's Ward 7 or 8. I was on the disability task force and yeah, just enjoy being at these meetings.
Thank you. Jackie.
Hello, Commissioner Jackie. Got home from work, so I'm just getting set up, but good to be here.
Thank you. Move on to Commissioner Laura Mitkiff.
Hi, good evening. Like Jackie, I just got back from work and happy to be here. I am a commissioner and live in Ward 2.
Thank you.
Beth and Eunice Kuhn.
Beth and Eunice, do you guys mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. I'm Beth Freelander. I'm a long-range planner with the City of Salem and the Planning Division.
Hi, I'm Eunice Kim, long-range planning manager, Planning Division, City of Salem.
And last but not least, Linnell.
Hi, I'm Linnell. I'm not feeling great today, but I love attending your meetings and I'm your fan club.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment? No public comment. Any member remarks or announcements?
Commissioner Roche here. Just a reminder that the Solstice fundraiser for PCL Partnerships and Community Living is on the 20th of June, and I believe there are still tickets for sale, but it's getting close to the dead end. So if anyone's interested in supporting a company or an organization that supports adults with disabilities, that'd be a fabulous time to do so.
Thank you. Anybody else? I do have something I'd like to share. I'd like to take a moment to recognize that June is LGBTQIA+ Pride Month. Pride Month is a time to celebrate the contributions, resilience, and dignity of LGBTQIA+ individuals in our community and across our country. It is also a reminder that the pursuit of equality, safety, and belonging is ongoing. This year, I think it's important to acknowledge that many members of the LGBTQIA+ community are experiencing uncertainty, concern, and for some, genuine fear about what the future may hold. Whether those concerns stem from public discourse, policy debate, or personal experiences, they are real and they deserve to be recognized. As chair of the Human Rights Commission, I want our LGBTQIA+ neighbors to know that they are seen, valued, and that their human dignity matters. Human rights are not reserved for those with whom we agree. They belong to all people. To those celebrating Pride Month this month, I wish you a happy Pride Month. And as we continue our work together as community, I'd like to borrow a lesson from one of my favorite television characters, Ted Lasso. Be curious, not judgmental. Regardless of our individual beliefs, views, or opinions, we can choose to listen, learn, and seek understanding. That spirit of curiosity does not require agreement, but it does require respect. And respect is where stronger communities begin. Move on to agenda item number 4, bias crime update. Welcome, Sergeant Dowd.
Hello, and thank you for your time today. My name is Robert Dowd. I'm a sergeant with the Salem Police Department. I run our personnel and training unit, and I'm the liaison with the Human Rights Commission for the Police Department. This evening, I have 3 items to discuss. One was from back on May 11th in Northeast Salem. It's a report of harassment based on race and national origin. There was a vendor that was vending and was confronted by a local resident The residents spat on the vendor and made racially derogatory remarks, and then threatened to contact immigration authorities. It was captured on video when police arrived. The report was made. Ultimately, the perpetrator owned up to what they did, and they were arrested and charged with harassment and with bias crime 2 in that instance. Then on the 14th of May in Southeast Salem, there was a report from Public Works of swastikas that had been spray painted on a public basketball court. Officers arrived and documented the markings, canvassed the area, and ultimately no suspects were able to be identified or found for this incident. So it's been documented for now and has been inactivated pending further leads. And then on the 2nd of June in Northwest Salem, there was a report of criminal mischief. So this was a road rage incident involving 2 motorists. The one motorist had a water bottle or something similar thrown at their car, and there was damage to their vehicle. The victim in this incident believed that the incident occurred with bias motive, but couldn't recall any bias remarks that were made. And then the suspect denied any bias and said that it was just purely a road rage incident. And so it was forwarded to the bias crime reporting. But upon further review and looking deeper into it, I can't say that there was any bias at all involved in this, other than the victim felt like it may have been, if that makes sense. It was very vague. The victim just believed it, but didn't have any basis for belief and couldn't cite a reason why they believed that it was bias motivated. Ultimately, the passenger in the vehicle who threw the item and damaged the car was charged with a crime, but there was no bias nexus. And that's all I have for the bias crime report.
Thank you, Sergeant Dowd, for that report. Are there any questions from commissioners for Sergeant Dowd? Seeing none. Thank you, Sergeant Dowd, for the report. Agenda item 4B, complaints of discrimination that were not routed through Salem Police Department.
Yes, there were 2 Americans with Disability Act complaints. One was in the West Salem area. It was reported that there was a basketball hoop blocking the sidewalk and wheelchair access. That was forwarded on to our code enforcement officers, and as far as I know, it's been taken care of. The other was related to a downtown business discrimination. 2 to 3 young people were asked by a business owner to leave their belongings or bags at the front register, and then was reported to being followed by employees while they were in the store. That's still under investigation. No outcome on that just yet. And those are the only 2 that I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda items 4C and 4D. They are kind of connected. Just kind of tee this up. The Disability Rights Task Force spent 6 months gathering feedback from Salem residents with disabilities, caregivers, service providers, and advocates, and compiled a list of recommendations that ultimately focused on several broad themes. And housing recommendations include incorporating universal design into new housing developments, increasing accessible housing opportunities, retrofitting existing units where feasible, and improving access to accessible units through application and prioritization processes. And in planning and infrastructure, recommendations included exploring incentives for accessible housing development, improving pedestrian connectivity to essential services, addressing sidewalk and crossing barriers, and incorporating accessibility considerations into future development and redevelopment projects. As a result, we've invited staff from the planning department, as well as staff from Salem Housing Authority to provide some updates based off of those findings. So we'll start with Beth and Eunice from the planning department.
Hi, I'm Beth again. Introduced myself earlier, but I'm a long-range planner with the City of Salem. And thank you for having us tonight to talk about what we're doing in regards to encouraging housing accessibility. So I just wanted to start with like a little bit of background from the planning department side of things, and then I'll talk about the specific actions that we're taking. So about a year ago, the City Council adopted our housing production strategy, which is 17 actions that we're going to take to encourage housing production and needed housing types, including accessibility, accessible housing, because that's one of our needed housing types. And since then, we've kind of hit the ground running, implementing these actions over the last year, and we'll continue to do so over the term of the housing production strategy. And so these actions that I'm talking about tonight kind of stem from that plan, and of course from the recommendations and suggestions from the Disability Rights Task Force. So the first one that you've so thoughtfully put up on the screen for me is our housing accessibility guide for sensory and cognitive disabilities. So we've heard that there's not as much awareness about how to build accessible housing for disabilities outside of like mobility disabilities, which have like really clear building code requirements. But other disabilities like being deaf and hard of hearing or vision impairment or developmental disabilities don't have as clear guidance on what housing accessibility looks like for people with those disabilities. And so we created this guide that outlines different things that can be integrated into housing that make it more accessible for each of those different types of disabilities. And we've have this now posted up on our website under our housing development resource page in English and Spanish. And we've kind of previewed it with developers before that when we're still in our draft phase, but just wanting to get it in front of them to encourage them to consider these opportunities as they're developing housing early on. And then we also have shared that with the Salem Housing Authority. And so we're hoping that by providing this resource, people that are in the business of building housing can take a look at this and make choices early on in their development to integrate features that are more accessible. Oftentimes, if they're considered at the very beginning, it's cost neutral or maybe a marginal increase in cost compared to retrofitting housing later on. And so we really want to get that idea to them in advance so they can do that from the beginning. And hopefully by highlighting how easy some of these strategies are, how easy some of these features are to integrate, we can see more of these accessible features in our housing across Salem. And I just wanted to say thank you to the Disability Rights Task Force for reviewing this document and providing feedback, and we were able to integrate their feedback and input, and it was helpful to have them look it over. So the second area that we are encouraging housing accessibility is through our code amendment. So we're in the process of developing this pretty large package of housing code changes. And as a part of that, we are introducing into our code bonuses for type A accessible housing, for single family accessory dwelling units, and then also for middle housing, which is like our 2-family, 3-family, 4-family townhouses and cottage clusters. And so for developments that have those housing types and are including a type A accessible unit, they can receive bonuses like having an additional unit that they wouldn't have been allowed otherwise. They can cover a bit more of the lot. They have slightly reduced side and rear setbacks, an increase in height, and they can exceed our maximum density if it's to accommodate that extra unit. And so by providing some of that flexibility, we're hoping to see more accessible units being built, specifically of those types of single family accessory dwelling units, and then our middle housing types. And we also brought that to the Disability Rights Task Force, and we did hear from them to like make sure to not reduce the front setbacks where ramps might be needed to meet those ADA requirements. So trying to be thoughtful about where can we provide flexibility and where would it not actually make sense. And then the final way that we're encouraging housing accessibility is through our livability and safety and livability bond, which has dedicated funding for affordable housing. And the city has developed criteria, or city staff have developed criteria for evaluating projects that want to receive those funds. And the evaluation criteria prioritizes projects that are providing more accessible units. Specifically, there's a threshold that if a project is providing 3 times as many type A accessible units than they're actually required to, they would receive points. And then, if they can meet the minimum number of points, then they will be considered for that funding. And I also just wanted to mention with that bond criteria, another feature that isn't specific to housing accessibility, but I think improves accessibility generally, is that there's also points awarded for proximity to our transit core network, proximity to groceries, to schools, childcare, and parks. And so for people that maybe are not able to drive, that proximity can potentially help them more easily access those amenities. And that bond criteria went in front of the bond oversight steering committee, and they recommended approval, and so it will be going forward to be reviewed by city council on the June 22nd meeting. And those are the updates I have. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from the commissioners? I do have a few questions. The first one, you mentioned the bonuses for developers that are seeking to build more disability accessible units. I wanted to know, have those bonuses resulted in more developers bringing those units online in Salem? And if so, how many more units do you think have been a result of those bonuses?
That's a great question. That actually brings me to something that I missed that I meant to say, and that's part of our code amendment package that will be going through the adoption process this year. So it's not in place currently, but it's going to be part of our code amendment that is going through the adoption process this fall. And so we won't know the impact of that until after adoption and after probably a few years to see what the impact has actually been.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Lara Mitkiff.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Beth, for your presentation. It's really wonderful to see the implementation of the incentives for the Type A accessible units, especially because my understanding about Type A accessible units is that they're move-in ready and fully equipped, and so they're, in terms of the range of accessible units, it's a good benchmark to meet, and one that exceeds probably even kind of minimum requirements for the Fair Housing Act. My question is slightly related to Robert's question, which is, although maybe not, how are you all communicating with developers these anticipated changes, these recommendations? I'm thinking now around the pamphlet that you just shared. I mean, one thing is posting it, another thing is going on and communicating. I know, Beth, I don't know you. I don't think we've met before, but Eunice and I have met many times, and I know Eunice is always out in the community doing that. So maybe help me understand more about that strategy. One, and then my second question, and you can take either one in whichever order, is so I was part of that approval process for the housing production strategy, and one of the things that we really talked about was this future emphasis on kind of middle housing, hopefully going towards infill. I mean, really focusing more on these kind of different types, higher density new builds. Is there future conversations, if that does become really the path forward, which I hope it does, where future incentives might be considered to make those new developments more accessible as they become a bigger part of our housing supply?
Okay, so the first question sorry, I've already, how are we informing
Your comm
developers
strategy. How
of
are you
this? Yeah.
communicating? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mentioned this really briefly, but we did kind of provide a you know, earlier draft of this accessibility guide. We had several focus groups with developers as part of our community engagement effort for the code amendment package to make sure that we were kind of meeting the mark about what are the actual barriers that we need to remove in our code to encourage production of housing. And so we shared this resource with that I would say, pretty good group of, size-wise, a pretty good group of developers there. And then we've got this housing development resource page. That's kind of a new page that we have posted that has like all of the different resources that are available for housing, to encourage housing development, from financial resources to things we're doing in the code to guidelines, and mapping technology that can be helpful. And this is the guide is posted on that website. I think we want to do more to promote it, but we have done some outreach, I think, via email to our like listserv about the new page of all the resources, including that guide. And as we continue to work with and hear from developers, we will certainly share this resource with them, and obviously open to ideas for other groups or other people that should see it.
I would just add that we also had meetings with the neighborhood association chairs and land use chairs where we provided this to them to get it out to the neighborhoods. We certainly could print it out and have it at our permit application center. We could give it out at our events as we start going to all of these events this summer, including Salem Service Day tomorrow. So we could certainly do more. So it's a good reminder for us to start doing that now that it's done.
Yeah, thank you, Eunice. And then the other question was about future incentives for accessible housing down the line. And I don't know that I have an answer to that. So the housing production strategy is our 17 actions for the next 6 years. I think that in the next iteration of that might be another opportunity for us to evaluate, are there other incentives or other techniques that we want to explore in terms of incentivizing more accessible housing. And then we'll also have the ability to kind of reflect on what we've done and the impact of the strategies that we, are doing as a part of this current term, I guess you'd say.
And I would also add that we got good feedback from the counselors that are on that bond oversight committee. We don't know about the full council yet, but there was some discussion now about potentially using some of the similar criteria like the bonus points or extra points for having more accessible units, and translating that into other incentives, whether it's a new MUTIP district or other kind of financial incentives as we look at those. And so as we go through those strategies in the housing production strategy that Beth was talking about, we could certainly look at bringing some of those ideas over.
Thank you.
Is it my turn?
Commissioner Roche.
Okay. So I think I missed the one part when you're talking about the financial incentives to building. Is the financial incentive because like it's easy for when no matter the industry, no matter what we do in life, you're just on autopilot, like this is how you do it, this is what we do. And so it's hard to break, to like pivot, to be like, oh, we need to do this, and to get people's attention, or like the developer's attention, and making that a priority. Is it an extra cost for them to start out like this? I know you said it's low cost if they start from the beginning, but to actually put plans in around that, like, I guess talk to me a little bit more about the reason behind that. I don't know if I'm asking the right question.
Yeah. So I think for the techniques that are in the guide that we have, some of those are really low cost, but for meeting like type A or type B accessible standards, I think that there can be extra costs for that, making sure that it's meeting those requirements. And there, in terms of like our code amendment bonuses, there can also be like size things, right? Like if you need wider hallways or you need a larger bathroom, something like that. There's then it makes sense, right? You're going to need to maybe cover more of the lot to make that make sense. And so I think that part of it is like an extra cost element of if we can make it more attractive to build the accessible unit, because then they are also going to get these bonuses. I think that makes it more likely that, as the developer would say, that it would pencil, right? It will make financial sense to do that. And I think that's probably the same to be said for the bond criteria, that if we can give them this extra incentive to provide maybe a more costly type of unit, that will help incentivize actually putting it on the ground.
So a follow-up question to that, is it reasonable to say that possibly a house or a unit that is built from the beginning with those specific accessibility needs could actually be a lower price point for sale on the market, like just because perhaps it causes the rooms to be smaller or the, different areas versus the traditional, if it was just the way they normally built. So the incentive can go towards possibly the lower end of the price they could get for the same plot of land they're building on.
I think it's hard. There's a lot of different factors into what the price point of housing would be. So for like market rate, I'm not sure I could give you a very confident answer about how it would translate into the cost to the consumer, to the buyer or the renter. I will say for the bond criteria, part of that is designated just for affordable housing. So they have to demonstrate that they're meeting an affordability component to it. So in that case, we have a little bit more say, I guess, over what that translates to in terms of rent or mortgage.
Okay. I think that's just my only questions. Thank you.
Nicole, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Are these turned on like this?
Yeah, the green light's on, it's on.
Okay. Hi, I'm Nicole Use. I'm the Director of Housing for Salem Housing Authority. And just a follow up to your question regarding value market, I can say that when we're incorporating ADA units into a building, there is a cost impact to those units, and a majority of that is the product that goes into fully accessible ADA units. And I think maybe that's where the incentivizing could also help encourage more ADA. Typically the fridges, the washer and dryers, the ranges, stovetops, different features of it will add anywhere from 10 to 20, 30,000, depending upon how it's laid out into adding that into a project. So, and that's per unit cost. So, it's very interesting, and it's very sad that an ADA fridge or an ADA range costs so much more than what we can run out to the store and pick up every single day.
Thank you. Haley, do you have a question?
Kind of, but also just a perspective too, as someone who has a physical disability who lives in a house that's not essentially renovated for myself. When talking about the resale value, that is something that has come up when discussing if I were to ever do set up a house where I don't need step stools in that type of situation. It does impact that sale, because I'd essentially have to sell to another person with dwarfism unless someone wants to remodel the entire house themselves. And then just as a thought to bring up to builders, maybe remind them that the disability group, we're the one minority and demographic that anyone can at any point in time become a part of. And I think
Absolutely.
some people don't think about that you don't have to be born with a disability to become disabled.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Are there any other questions for Beth or Eunice?
I have one more, Robert, if I'm allowed one.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. This might be more for Eunice, only because I think I asked her this like 8 months ago. and we weren't prepared to have a conversation about it, and we may not be able to tonight either. But just to revisit it, one of the things that came up for the task force and was in our recommendations was, okay, you make a bunch of, well, you make more accessible housing, uh, whether in kind of multi-unit housing or whatever the case may be, but then non-disabled people, able-bodied people get access to that housing first. And so, in other words, the people who are in, for whom it is intended to serve aren't the beneficiaries of all the benefits, the bonuses, the whatever the case may be. And part of the dreaming of the task force was to partner with the city to find a way to maybe not provide, well, I'll leave it broadly, just to be able to minimize that, to basically ensure that units were being filled by people who would benefit from it. And I think, as I recall, about 8 months ago, there wasn't a real sense of direction of how that would work, or two, whether it was even possible. And I just don't know. I want to revisit whether you'd be able to reflect on that more, or if there's any other insights you might be able to provide.
I'm not sure. I mean, I actually think maybe Nicole might have a better feel for that as the landlord. Would that be okay, Nicole?
Sure thing. So, thank you. That's a great point. I guess as a public and Indian Housing Authority, I have a different set of rules and requirements than maybe out on the private market, but I can tell you, and I did make a note in this information to touch on this tonight, because maybe this isn't widely known, but every application into the Salem Housing Authority has areas to check on the needs for an ADA unit, or even if you need hearing or impairment smoke detectors, different features to that property. When that's marked, that goes onto a completely separate waiting list for ADA units. And we actually hold an ADA waiting list for every single property. And we go through that entire waiting list to ensure that individuals, if an ADA apartment comes to open, we want to first ensure that somebody who needs the features of that unit get first opportunity to be able to use it. Let's say we go through the entire waiting list, which has happened at properties before we find an individual that needs the features of that unit. We then will open back up an ADA waiting list, and if we cannot come up with an individual, then whoever doesn't need the features of the unit actually has to sign a lease addendum that states they understand they are moving into an apartment, that they do not need the features of this apartment. And if somebody who does need the features of the apartment, they will be asked to move in a timely fashion or to the next available apartment. So we do have a mechanism at the Salem Housing Authority to address this concern. I would love to, I did note it in here, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to dig deeper into the fair housing world as to why this isn't also done on other properties, but I can tell you, if it's a low-income housing tax credit, which is the majority of affordable housing in Salem, they will have this same requirement to keep a separate ADA waiting list. How to encourage other private market landlords, I think that's probably through education. We are trying to do more landlord engagement, and can be hopeful that they want to also ensure that these units are going to individuals who need the features of them.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, that's a great reminder. And as I recall, that process that you've just outlined for Salem Housing Authority, I think was noted in our process, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm glad it works for folks. I think the question for the task force was, how do we make that kind of universal? How do we encourage that universally for developers in Salem? Because obviously, a lot of folks who need access to those spaces aren't in a subsidized housing environment, or aren't looking to live in those places. And so, how do we ensure that, or if not ensure it, then at least make it a more common practice. But thank you, Nicole. I really appreciate that.
And just one more comment to follow up on that. I would be happy to reach out to SMI, who does a rental report quarterly, and see if they have some additional information or could add this as a question to try to help us gauge whether this is standard practice at majority of the apartment complexes. I would believe that there would be some sort of fair housing requirement. I can tell you the lease addendum writer is a standard document in the multifamily Northwest forms, which majority of landlords that are more than 100 units use in this area.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. I look forward to that.
Thank you. And Ms. Oots, while you've got the mic, I'll let you just come through the rest of the recommendations that you want to comment on, and we can ask you questions from there.
Sure. Chair, Commissioners, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be a part of coming to the Human Rights Commission and being able to have these conversations. I've learned so much. I love the listening sessions, the feedback that you've received, the documents that we're receiving. We understand as a housing authority, we're not perfect, and that the only way we'll continue to make strides is by listening to those who we help in our community and the most vulnerable population. So we always are interested in hearing more information. So this document's been fascinating for me to go through and review. As well as Beth and Eunice, the document that they have provided to me has some very valuable information, and we've actually met with our core contract architects, and they were delighted to receive something and have helped us process through. So we're already looking at ways to incorporate a lot of these suggestions and information into future projects. A lot of our future projects are financially driven with investor partnerships that also have to have a say in the way that the per unit and costs are involved. So I'm happy to continue this education process and bring this information to the forefront. I saw that going through this, just wanted to say that from a housing authority perspective, the report would likely create a moderate financial pressure over time. Although most recommendations are framed as goals rather than mandates, we want to see how we can help achieve these. The financial impacts would fall into several categories, one being capital improvement costs. And our largest potential cost driver is retrofitting existing units and common areas for accessibility. Recommendations include wider doorways, ramps, automatic doors, grab bars, lever hardware, and other accessibility upgrades. While some modifications are relatively inexpensive, larger structural changes can be costly, and most particularly in our older buildings. But I will tell you that we in 2019, had the great pleasure of doing a comprehensive review of our waiting list needs, and we took 50-year-old public housing units in a private-public partnership, and we turned 5 bedrooms, which were now obsolete. We do not have as many 5-bedroom households getting on our waiting list, and we're able to turn our 5 bedrooms in multiple properties into a 1 or 2 bedrooms and fully accessible units at properties that never had ADA units on them. So it is possible, and we're continuing to look for ways to make that happen. What potential impacts could be is that we increase our capital funding expenditures and additional modernization and rehabilitation project costs over time, and possible need to prioritize accessible improvements over other deferred maintenance projects. New construction and redevelopment costs. The report encourages a universal design and accessibility features to be incorporated into all future housing developments. While designing accessibility into projects from the outset is generally less expensive than retrofitting later, it can still increase our upfront development costs through larger unit layouts, enhanced accessibility features, and additional design and engineering requirements for buildings. That said, many developers would view these costs as relatively modest when incorporated into a design stage in the beginning planning stages. So having this information up front, getting it to your architects and engineers quickly, and having those conversations in the forefront is invaluable. And I appreciate these documents so that I can have these conversations as we move forward. There were some recommendations that could increase administrative workload, revisiting our waiting list and prioritization of procedures. I do believe we have an excellent waiting list process. It does meet our federal, state, and local requirements. And I'm happy to bring back more information in detail for that, just so that everybody can understand how we do manage our waiting list and maybe the volume and the numbers that we do receive in those and how many we go through. I would love an opportunity in the future, maybe in the fall sometime, to be able to bring back some information on our ADA accessible units. There was a section in here about how many units we do have. We actually have ADA units in every single apartment complex that Salem Housing Authority owns. And any newer apartment complex, the entire first floor is adaptable with ADA units in it as well. So if allowed some additional time and offered the opportunity to come back, I would love to provide that information to everybody. Tracking accessible units is no problem. We have a very good tracking system, and coordinating with service providers and participating in accessibility reporting and oversight. If you would like us to continually come back and report out, we would be happy to do that as well. Let's see. Training costs. There's actually some information in here, and we have already taken some steps. The report recommends expanding staff training on trauma-informed practices, neurodiversity, communication differences, and disability awareness. The costs are generally modest compared to over capital improvements. I can tell you that we are in the process of building a Permanent Supportive Housing Academy. We are pulling together our supportive service provider teams and our Salem Housing Authority teams. They just completed one yesterday that I'm very excited to say went over amazingly. They did de-escalation training and trauma-informed training, as well as scenario training, many of the recommendations that were in here as well. So we're already trying to make improvements and steps to make that happen. Because some of the comments and feedback that you received in your listening session was about communication resources and conversations at supportive services sites. We've also taken steps to do surveys at our permanent supportive housing sites. We've already received several back. We'll continue to project this out. It's been very interesting, and I'm happy to, I'm actually happy to get this information firsthand and hopefully make improvements as well. So overall, moderate operational impact and potentially some long-term capital costs. The greatest financial exposure would stem from retrofitting existing housing stock and incorporating enhanced accessibility standards into future development projects. Administrative training reporting costs are expected to be completely manageable within our agency and may be partially offset through grant funding or partnerships. I think this is a great report. I'm happy to go through a few of these. There is one recommendation that I would like to make. There is one section that we completely 100% agree with you all, but we are unable to do, and maybe Eunice and her team can help. This may be a conversation for how we do some advocacy level. It has to do with door openers and door closers on all exterior doors and the weight of them. We are required to have these by the state fire marshal. We're also required to have these as a part of the federal Inspire program. We've recently even attempted to try to do reasonable accommodations to remove some of those, and we were told we were not allowed to do that, and they all had to be put back on. We've gone so far as to buy some of the highest ends door closers that we can find, that we can get it down to the correct weight while still meeting the fire marshal's requirements to close. This is an area we hear often about, and the difficulties. We completely understand individuals who have mobility issues, use walkers, use mobility chairs or other devices in attempting to get into doors of their homes when they have a required door closer. The door, we cannot change the weight of the doors or the door closure situation. That is required by law for fire safety of the building. So, however, we can help as a housing authority. We would be happy to bring information, as this is a #1 finding that we receive when people are removing the door closers from their doors also. Amongst that, I am happy to answer any other questions or discuss any of the other topics that are specifically related to Salem Housing Authority and how we can continue to improve together.
Thank you, Director Roots. Are there any questions?
I have a question. I don't know if this is the right platform to ask it, so feel free to defer me to somewhere else. But there's like a delicate balance between like the low income housing and such with taxes and such, because my understanding, totally could be wrong. I thought that like with the low income housing, the developer oftentimes defers paying the taxes, the property taxes on the place for so many years, and then they start to pick it up later. Like what is the balance of that with trying to get more affordable housing? Because I understand the need for it, with balancing how much the city is actually receiving in property taxes to be able to function properly.
That's a really great question. There's so many different programs out there. I'm not exactly sure which exact program you're talking about. I can tell you under low-income housing tax credits, this is the most confusing program, and I could probably sit here for a half an hour and try to describe out how this process works. A lot of people hear low-income housing tax credit and believe there are different variations of what the program actually is. We go out for proposals when we're developing a project with private partnerships with lenders that want to buy our tax credits or buy tax credits. And what ends up happening is they make an agreement over a 15-year period of time. They receive off of the amount that they could have made from a property or the deficits of a property, they will get that tax credit for going into these partnerships and providing this lending criteria. At the end of the 15-year, many of these investors exit these programs, and then we, such as Salem Housing Authority, will end up owning that property outright for a very minimal cost. Of course, we're Salem Housing Authority. All of our properties have tax exemptions on them. We do pay a pilot on all of our public and Indian Housing Authority owned properties based on the amount of rents we receive. We're not required to do that, but we are trying to uphold and do our part in the community. And as well as then there are other programs. And I want to say that in a public benefit, when we were in crisis for housing, we also are not the fastest developers in the market. Everything that we do has a federal tie to it, which takes a lengthy period of time to get through environmentals and all the requirements to make these projects come online. We have gone into several public-private partnerships with investors. We've increased over a 6-year period of time since we started doing our tax exemption program and going into a legal partnership with entities. We have created over 1,100 units of affordable housing throughout the city of Salem, and I believe they're all in the city of Salem. And just by that program alone, and to keep in mind that Salem Housing Authority owns 798 of our own units as well. We were quickly able to gain traction with adding that specific program. I understand there is a fine balance of needing to have taxes for operations of a city in whole and trying to bring in more affordable housing, and where that balancing is probably a really good question for the future. Or maybe we sit down and have a longer, robust conversation about that.
I see Commissioner Laura Metcalf.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Nicole, for coming to talk with us tonight, and for your careful attention and consideration of the report. It was truly a pleasure to have been able to participate in those listening sessions and learn from residents and of course staff. And I look forward to continuing these conversations as you alluded to at the beginning of your remarks. I think my question is, and this may not be something we can get into detail tonight, and that's fine. Again, this is a longer conversation, but you kind of gestured towards the costs of capital improvements in existing buildings, and then also the ambition of incorporating some of these comments proactively and prescriptively and in future developments. Do you have a sense of, you describe them as moderate, but I guess what I'm hoping to maybe hear a little bit more about from you is just what does moderate mean? What kind of conversations are you having internally? Are there conversations about doing some of these capital improvements at existing buildings? And if so, how can we continue to be part of those discussions? And again, I thank you so much for your presentation.
Definitely. Thank you. Great question. So we have, we've already been doing some cost assessments off of the information provided. There's different variations of materials. The very interesting part, and I don't know if I can flip to the page quickly. I'm sure you guys seen there's a unique range that's pictured in one of these photos on page 14.
Yeah.
Wow, did we stump a few of us in trying to find this range exactly? We were able to cost this range. This range at our costs, we were able to find at anywhere from $2,200 to $2,700 a piece. We do find it very interesting, and we do know that individuals that could benefit from this range, and so we're still curious to investigate it more. We were really hoping, and we've been talking to HD Supply and some of our other suppliers of product to see, do they make something like this in a version that doesn't have to be wall mounted or in that exact version? Those are some of the types of conversations we've had. The hands-free faucets, absolutely agree. Easy, very minimal cost impact. The painting of one wall, everybody shook their head in agreement. That would be a very easy feature that we could add into many, either whether it's a retrofit or into new construction. Lighting, we completely agree. We've tried different variations, and but we've missed the boat on some of it. We could have added some additional adjustment to lighting features. The one that we are still trying to project and cost out, because we found them in other countries, but finding them easily in through our suppliers, is the countertops that are like the freestanding desks that you can mobilize up and down. So there is variations that we're trying to source and predict what that would cost, but there's very easy changes. I have had conversations with developers that are in the process of looking at developing or in the middle of it, and have encouraged them to put the door codes as requested in this. So anytime I get the opportunity to bring some of these features up, I'm in my industry and with other developers out there, I am trying to have these conversations to bring some awareness to it. The one picture that there was very interesting conversations amongst the teams on the drawers. That's fascinating, and that could be an easy adaptation. We actually have one property that has some failing cabinetry that's not that old, but it happens. And we may look at some sort of feature of that through our capital expenditures in replacing. And then there was a comment brought up too that there are some households that would not want that. They're already struggling with the cabinets, the features of the cabinets. The drawers get overloaded. They were afraid that these would also get overloaded or the rails would come off. So this would be a great opportunity when we go in to do retrofit projects or renovations, we have what you guys did is listening sessions, and we would have some of these conversations and survey our residents to see what would meet their needs as well. I'm not sure if I fully answered your question.
You did. It's very encouraging, and I appreciate how directly you're engaging with this. And hopefully, I think maybe just looking to the future, hopefully we can have more conversations. I think we would love to hear about exactly what these costs are and kind of what kind of budget considerations you're considering. And I think we would just love to continue hearing about this as you do replace failing infrastructure or and building development. So thank you so much, Nicole. Really appreciate it.
And definitely, I would like to also say, and I saw about the grants and incentives and different programs. We've had a project of 2 of our senior properties in the what is called the ORCA system with Oregon Housing and Community Services for over 3 years. Buildings are 30 years old. These are our seniors that we work very hard to keep in place while they age in place. These buildings need to be upgraded with modern features, modern ADA compliant features. And unfortunately, we are, even though we've been awarded a legislative ask, an energy grant, we're in the last process of just getting through for state funding to make this happen. And we hope, hopefully in 27, 28, we can do this. This is very important to us. We will also be adding generators because ice storms are very, very challenging on our senior population and something they requested. When the power goes out and one of our buildings went down for 11 days in a previous ice storm, it was one of the most challenging 11 days for many of them to continue to remain there. Also, elevators don't work when your power is out and we can have no ability to get power there. That is a huge impact. And so we're seeing that for future projects and for this renovation as well. We're also putting solar panels on these buildings to lower energy costs because our seniors are very much struggling with utility costs to remain housed long term. So we look forward to having conversations in the future, but funding is very challenging when it comes to retrofits and preservation right now.
Well, if there's anything that we can do as a commission to endorse, publicly support your budget requests, please keep us in mind as future partners as you navigate the sometimes labyrinthine legislative sessions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Unfortunately, we do have the last hour blocked off for our community belonging survey, but I appreciate your willingness to always appear before the city council. I also wanted to take time to thank Miss Kim and Miss Freelander. And I look forward to being in touch as we continue to discuss some of those recommendations and see what we can present to council as a collaborative to ensure that the recommendations that we are providing are realistic and are able for city staff to do. The last thing I think the commission wants to do is present a bunch of recommendations that aren't feasible and then to back our city departments into corners about, hey, you shall get this done, even though it's not realistic. And that was the spirit of some of these ongoing conversations. So I appreciate all 3 of you for presenting this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You guys are all welcome. We do have the Western Oregon University presenting the findings of the community belonging survey. So everyone's welcome to stick around for that, but I will call Professor Bradshaw to the desk and turn it over to her.
And then the presentation team is on Zoom. So I'm going to turn it over to the team.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for introducing us. My name is Cody. I'm a proud Western Oregon University grad student, and we are really excited to talk about our community belonging survey. I put all of the names of everyone in the class that contributed, and of course, Professor Bradshaw. Next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you so much. This is our presentation team. This is who you'll be hearing from tonight, and maybe some more. Everyone took place in this survey, and I'm really excited for hopefully all of us to get the chance to talk about what parts we did. And we love an agenda, so we'll just go through this really quick. We're going to go through the background and objectives. Then we're going to dive right into the methodology, respondent groups, the sense of community, discrimination, the trust in the Salem Police Department, awareness of the HRC, and recommendations. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to talk about background. Our partnership started in 2020 with Western Oregon University and with an HRC partnership to better understand residents' experiences with belonging, discrimination, and inclusion. Survey findings have helped inform community initiatives and policy decisions, including the addition of housing status as a protected class under Salem's Anti-Discrimination Code in 2022, which is a big deal. This protection makes it unlawful for discrimination against individuals based on whether they are housed or unhoused, helping promote equity and inclusion throughout the Salem community. So you're probably wondering a little bit why this survey was conducted. The survey, or the Salem Human Rights Commission, seeks to better understand the community experiences related to belonging, discrimination, and trust initiatives, and HRC resources. The survey helps identify areas where Salem residents feel supported and areas where barriers still exist. Special attention was given to 3 priority populations identified by the HRC, which are people experiencing homelessness, Latino, Latina residents, and Pacific Islanders. And in 2026, our partnership still continues. And then here is our 5 research objectives. Number 1 was to assess the sense of community, including what increases and decreases individual feelings of community. To quantify the types of discrimination, frequency of discrimination, and locations of discrimination witnessed or heard about and discrimination personally experienced. Number 3 was to measure levels of trust in the Salem Police Department's ability to handle cases involving discrimination. Number 4 was to measure awareness of Salem's Human Rights Commission. And number 5 was to compare experiences and perspectives between subgroups, including people experiencing homelessness, Latino, Latina, and Pacific Islanders. And now we're going to talk a little bit about methodology. So this survey was open from April 27th to May 12th. It was self-administered in Qualtrics. It was available in Chukanese, English, Marshallese, and Spanish. All respondents were 18 plus and live or regularly spent time in the city of Salem. It was a non-probability convenience judgment sample, and it was distributed online and at in-person events with a hard copy. And we had 698 respondents. Next slide, please.
Just the email, going on the radio, getting Salem Reporter to do an article. It was really a team effort to get the 698 respondents.
Professor Bradshaw, just real quick, is that the most respondents that we've had since the survey started, or was there a year that we had more than this number? believe this does outpace last year.
When we started, we actually had a much bigger Facebook. And this year, the City of Salem communication team was awesome and put all their stuff out on Facebook. And in previous years, I just think there was more engagement in general in Facebook and on Facebook. And we could see, 300 people complete the survey the day it went live on Facebook. Postings, it was really the Salem Reporter article that generated 200 responses that day. But just over the years, you see are engaging with drives less engagement than it used to. And so
Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, like Professor Bradshaw was just mentioning, we had online distribution and community outreach events. So some of our online distribution was, the City of Salem website, the Instagram page, the Facebook page, TMZ radio interview, which I thought was really cool. It was an interview with members of HRC, which included an invitation to complete the survey, which was on about May 11th. And the Salem Reporter also ran a story which was featured in their email blast directly and resulting in over 200 completed surveys, which I thought was really cool. Additionally, HRC partners and local community organizations generously shared the invitation and survey links via social media posts, emails, and newsletters, which we are very grateful for. Some community outreach events that we did were Oak Park Church Wellness Table, Food Pantry at Chemeketa Community College, the Micronesian Islander Community Meeting, Church at the Park Young Adult Lunch, which was a lot of fun. I personally went and I learned a lot. And the Soup Squad at Marion Square Park. And just a deep dive into a little bit of our respondent groups in our general population. Our general population was about 527 respondents. Most of these survey respondents received the survey invitation through the main distribution, which are survey respondents who completed the survey, providing more information about their experiences and demographics. When asked about housing status, these respondents did not indicate that they are currently experiencing homelessness. While this group is not representative of Salem, it is most similar to the total Salem population and is most useful for making general decisions. And then our next group is our over quota with our people experiencing homelessness, which was about 105 respondents. When asked on the survey, have you experienced homelessness? The respondents marked, yes, I am currently experiencing homelessness. Because of the importance of the subgroup in current decision making and understanding the topic of belonging, we intentionally conducted an over quota, meaning that even though depending on the data source, there's less than 1 to 2% of the Salem population experiencing homelessness. We included efforts in our distribution plan to have additional respondents be people experiencing homelessness. And then the last two are Latino, Latine. So these respondents mark Latino, Latine for race ethnicity. They could also mark other races and ethnicities as well. About half completed the survey online and about half completed it through a survey at an outreach event, which I thought was really interesting. Next is our Pacific Islander, which was about 43 folks. These respondents mark Pacific Islander, Micronesian, Native Hawaiian, or Makanana Maoli for their race ethnicity. They could also mark other races and ethnicity as well. About 1/3 completed the survey online and about 2/3 completed it through a survey outreach event.
Yes, can you, if you can press the button, make sure the green light is on. It looks like it was off the last time. There we go. Thank you.
Yes. Just wanting to pause here because these 4 groups, when we get into the analysis, the students have sliced and diced the data looking at these respondent groups. And so I just want to invite commissioners, if you have any questions. I mean, we talked about, hey, yay, we got 698 respondents. Some people answered 2 or 3 questions and then their phone rang or their dog was barking or, and then they stopped. And so to be part of that general population of 527, they had to get far enough in the survey that we have information about them. So when we're looking at some of the early questions, some of the open ends at the beginning, those people, any data that we could use, we did. But you're going to see these numbers of 527 for that general population. There's no overlap between the general population and the overquota of people experiencing homelessness, but there is overlap between those two and the Latino and the Pacific Islander. And so they don't quite all add up. And as Cody shared, people who marked Latino in the Latino population, they could mark other races or ethnicities. So they're not totally clean buckets. And I just wanted to pause to have the opportunity if you're like, okay, wait, say that one more time, or this does make sense, or have a question, because you're going to see these groups and these colors again. Awesome. And I was super happy that we have big enough sample sizes. You're going to see some numbers where we're like, hey, let's slice and dice the data and look for some directional things. And maybe there's 20 people in a group, or maybe there's 10 people in a group. But having over 30 from a statistical standpoint, I feel like there's more confidence in showing sample sizes over 30. So the fact that all of these are bigger than 30 and some of them are, really robust. And last year we had 60 people experiencing homelessness in the response set, and this year to have 105, that's a lot of people looking across these bubbles and these numbers that took their time, their effort, their energy to share their information, and having big enough groups that we can have some confidence that, this wasn't just a random, like 3 people on this corner that have this opinion, but that we have a bigger group of folks sharing their perspective.
Okay, thank you, Professor. So today I'm sharing the 2026 Community Belonging Survey findings on sense of community and belonging in Salem. The big picture is that more than half of the general population respondents, that's 54%, said they feel a sense of community here, but that experience is not always shared equally across groups. Next slide, please. So I think this next slide makes that difference clear, right? People experiencing homelessness and Latina respondents report lower belonging, while Pacific Islander respondents report higher belonging by comparison. I think which tells us that belonging is not just a feeling, right? It's unevenly distributed. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So looking at change over the past year, right? Nearly half of the general population and Pacific Islander respondents said that their sense of community stayed the same. That steadiness matters, right? But what stands out more is that the increase was stronger among Pacific Islanders, which suggests some groups are moving towards deeper belonging while others are not. Next slide, please. Okay, so the decrease story is the other side of that picture. The report says that the majority of people experiencing homeless and Latino respondents reported that their sense of community has decreased in the past 12 months, right? That's including 49% of people experiencing homelessness and 33% of Latino respondents saying it decreased a lot. That is a profound reminder that belonging can erode quickly when people are living with instability or exclusion. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is where safety comes in, right? The report notes that safety is a prerequisite for community. And 77% of the general population say they feel safe in their neighborhood, compared with a much lower strong agreement among people experiencing homelessness and Latino respondents. And if you see here, downtown feels even less safe for some groups, right? Especially people experiencing homelessness who had the lowest agreement at 25%. Next slide, please. So I wanted to leave you guys with this for a brief moment, right? I think this comment captures the connection between safety and belonging in a very human way. It reflects what the data is telling us overall, that when people do not feel safe or respected, it becomes harder for them to feel that they belong. Next slide, please.
And if I can just interject on that slide. So when we did the surveys out in the field, we did a lot of the surveys with people experiencing homelessness in hard copy. And some of them, we just gave them the survey and they'd fill it in. Some they'd, sit with a student or with me or with Linnell or with another community advocate, and we'd mark boxes. But we ended up with a stack of surveys in a hard copy that we had to do the data entry. And we closed the field on a Tuesday night. And Linnell and I had split the rest of the hard copies that needed to be entered. And life being what it is, it was pretty late by the time I sat down to do my data entry. And we had class on Wednesday. And I knew I needed to show up to class with a data set that I could say to the students, go, start analyzing. We've got these jobs. You've all split up your tasks. The data set is closed. It is clean. It is complete. You're ready. So I'm sitting at my kitchen table. It's getting pretty late. And I'm, checking boxes and clicking, putting all this data into Qualtrics, pretty just like in a steady, getting in the rhythm, check, 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 click here, click there. And I hit this comment at the end of this survey. And it says, I don't feel safe anywhere in Salem, Oregon. And it just I just had to stop my data entry. I feel like so much of quantitative data is averages. It's, the mean in this group said this about safety, or this percent strongly agreed and that percent didn't. And this presentation, the students are so great. There's a lot of bar charts. And I just stopped when I looked at that comment as I was getting ready to type it in, and I took that picture of it. And I feel like it's an important, as Fernando mentioned, we're looking at all these numbers, but that we had conversations with real people, and that, even though 77% of the general population agrees that they feel safe in their neighborhood, we have this respondent who said she doesn't feel safe anywhere in Salem. And it's one of those moments where I pause and I'm like, the work that you are doing as a commission matters. The questions you're raising, the things you're advocating for, the stories you're listening to, the data that we're gathering, it's not just running the average on Excel and making a bunch of bar charts. It's recognizing that there's this whole range of experiences. And when somebody writes this in, then I'm like, okay, what are we gonna do about it? And I just kind of sat at my kitchen table late at night and paused in my data entry and said, this is worth capturing. This is worth sharing. This is worth thinking about. What do we do? So I'll turn it back to you, Fernando.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Professor. Okay, so absolutely here, I wanted to leave you guys with a couple of quotes while I go through this, but what we covered is that when respondents talked about what increases belonging, right? The biggest theme was relationship building and neighbor connection at 24%, right? They also pointed to civic trust and representation, as we were just discussing, plus community events and shared experiences, right? And I think this shows that people want more than proximity. They want connection, care, and the chance to participate in community life. Next slide, please. And when they talked about what decreases belonging, the largest theme was experiencing homelessness and loss of dignity at 43%, right? And that was followed by discrimination and dehumanization at 33%. And then lastly, balancing safety versus compassion at 32%. So in other words, people are telling us that belonging grows where there is dignity, right? And it breaks down where people are dismissed, divided, or left unsupported. Thank you very much. If there's no questions, I'm going to pass this to Emerson.
Before we switch to the objective around discrimination, comments, questions, anything the students could clarify in that section about belonging? Anything you want to ask about or make?
Can you go up to the one page up with the increased sense of community? Thank you. I was looking at one thing. Okay, thanks.
I'll recognize Linnell. Real quick though, Linnell, before you start, I want to just take a quick moment to thank you so much because year over year, you have poured your heart and soul into making sure that the Community Belonging Survey reflects the voice of our unhoused neighbors and the advocacy, the outreach that you put into it to see that we had over 100 individuals experiencing homelessness take the time to fill out the survey, and the fact that they've even took the time and everything to write into the open comment section, oftentimes, which is, the part where a lot of people skip over, and the fact that they, felt the trust and the safety with you and the team as they did the survey. So I just wanted to thank you, Linnell, for all of your hard work on this Community Belonging Survey. We could not do this without you. Linnell, I believe you might be muted.
Sorry. Thank you so much. This survey means so much to me. It makes me cry for reasons I know and reasons I can't even put my finger on. You hear so many stories, and the comments people add say so much. I am so grateful that you guys continue this survey. I'm so grateful for the partnership that you guys have. And I'm so grateful for the analysis that shows trends so we know if we're getting better or worse. And I'm very grateful that this survey has made a significant difference and changes by adding housing status to a protected class. Just a couple of minor details for the outreach events that were listed. I did go to Grace Church and got a lot of surveys done there. So I don't know if you guys would want to add that as one of the places. And I was invested in people experiencing homelessness are not likely to have access to just sit at home and at your dining room table after dinner and do surveys, which is why I feel like it's so important to take it to the streets. But I thought people in poverty are in a similar situation. So I did go to the Cherry Avenue DHS office where they have SNAP and OHP, and many people did surveys, and they were talking a lot about SNAP benefits being decreased and how do you feel a sense of belonging when you can't even eat and it's getting harder and harder. They were talking about ICE and the fear that they're experiencing from that. So I don't know if it warrants including outreach to people experiencing poverty that are not homeless, but also marginalized.
Yes, we'll add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Linnell.
Thank you all.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding the belonging section before we get into the second half of the presentation? Seeing none, we can go ahead and proceed. Thank you.
Oh, can you go to my slide? Hi, everybody. My name is Emerson. I'm here to talk about discrimination here in Salem. So 63% have witnessed other people be subjected to discrimination in the last 12 months, while only 23 have personally experienced that. And we're going to dive into that more and really refine those metrics. Next slide, please. So like my peers talked about, our three priority populations were people experiencing homelessness, Latino, and Pacific Islander. As you can see, a disproportional amount of people experiencing homelessness have experienced discrimination. And you'll see that as a trend throughout the survey that it's quite common, along with the Latino population is also disproportionately experiencing discrimination. Well, interestingly enough, only 47% of Pacific Islanders have witnessed and only 35 have experienced. So like Fernando was talking about, it's affecting different groups differently. Next slide, please.
I'll just comment on that one. If you look at the witnessed and heard about, Pacific Islander is just below the general population. But if you look at personally experienced, they're actually above the general population. So in all the groups, you have kind of a, here's the percent that witnessed and then a smaller percent that has experienced it. But Pacific Islander is different there, that they're above the general population in witnessing, and they're below in witnessing, but above in experiencing.
So this is talking about frequency. As you can see, housing status basically beats out everything else by a long shot. The top three are housing status, mental disability, and physical disability as far as weekly and daily discrimination. Next slide, please. This is a very interesting heat map. So this is about locations where discrimination is witnessed. As you can see, our priority groups, people experiencing homelessness and Latinos, it's 70 and 82% in businesses. I think that speaks volumes on our community. The same with public spaces and the outdoors, 89% and 64% respectively. I think that's just outrageous. Next slide, please. This is a similar one, but it includes gender and sexual orientation. And like I said before, public spaces and businesses just demolish it. And it's horrendous that it's in our community like that. We also mentioned online groups. There tends to be a lot of discrimination there too, which has been a big blind spot, especially in this modern age. Next slide, please. Well, with that, I think I'll pass it off to Jess.
Thank you, Emerson. So when we look at trust in the Salem Police Department around discrimination cases, the biggest takeaway is that the community is really divided. Well, we can read from the data collected in this graph shows us that about 37% of respondents expressed some level of trust, 14 strongly agree, and 23 somewhat agree. In contrast, 40% expressed distrust, including 18% who strongly disagree and 22 who somewhat disagree. Next slide, please. However, trust isn't experienced the same way by everyone. This is measured on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 strongly disagree and 3 is neutral, and 5 means strongly agree. People experiencing homelessness report the lowest levels of trust with an average of 2.3, and many strongly disagree that they trust the police. Latinx responders also show lower trust than the general population, with more people disagreeing than agreeing. On the other hand, Pacific Islanders respondents report higher levels of trust, with their average above neutral. Next slide, please. We also can see a pattern when it comes to age. Younger people, especially those between 18 and 24, have the lowest levels of trust. From there, trust increased with age. With older adults reporting higher levels, younger generations are much more skeptical, while other generations tend to be more trusting. So why do people feel this way? Nearly half respondents, 46%, say they don't trust the police in general. That tells us that the issue goes beyond trust in the Salem Police Department and reflects broader concerns about the policing overall. At the time, about 30% of people share positive personal experience with the Salem Police Department, and this is important because of these personal positive interactions are one of the strongest ways to build trust. And so to bring it to life, we want to highlight a few voices from the community. One person shared a positive experience saying they were helped from the Salem Police Department, something that was not related to discrimination. But there's also concerns from the community, such as the Salem Police Department being understaffed or overworked. And then there's this stress of what can the police department even do? What are they just don't trust the police in general. And that in the past they've proven to be non-responsive or transparent about past interactions. These quotes really highlight what's behind the numbers, concerns about staffing, about questions about police, and realistically address and ongoing issues around transparency and accountability. We also hear concerns about fear and discrimination and need for more training, especially around discrimination and mental health. So overall, we see that trust isn't just divided. It varies a lot depending on people's experiences, their age, and their community. But we believe there's a clear path forward. The data shows that positive, respectful interactions with trainings and outreach, awareness with the community are one of the most effective ways to build trust. And that's where the biggest opportunity is. And with that, go to the next slide.
I'll chime in on that one because it was really interesting. I think, Cody, it was you who went through all of these open-ended comments and coded them by themes. And around the distrust, there was a variety of themes and barriers and concerns, but the positive all was this theme about positive personal interactions. Direct experiences, direct conversations. They helped me in this situation. I talked to them at this event. I think some of the students who were at the Church at the Park lunch talked about some of the officers had come there and had sat and talked with them, and that really increased their trust. And so I know our police department does events, coffee with a cop and cookie with a, and they're doing so many great things to strengthen those connections. And seeing that theme as like this lone positive, I was like, that is making a difference, that people who have those positive conversations and connections, that is building trust in a way that carries over to other categories.
Thank you, Professor. So with awareness of the Human Rights Commission, it varies significantly across groups. Among the general population, about 44% of respondents said that they were aware of the HRC before talking to or taking the survey, meaning nearly half were familiar, which is consistent with past findings. However, awareness is much lower historically. Among historically marginalized communities, only 70% of people experience homelessness reported awareness, while Latinx and Pacific Islanders respondents were about 25 to 26%. Overall, groups that report experiencing discrimination more frequently, such as BIPOC or LGBTQIA+, people with disabilities, and those experiencing homelessness also tend to have lower awareness of the HRC, which highlights the key opportunities for more targeted outreach. We also see clear differences by age. Younger residents, especially those aged 18 to 24, have much lower awareness compared to adults. This suggests that they need to expand outreach through platforms like social media and strengthen engagement in schools and colleges. Awareness is lower with the LGBTQIA+ community and among the people experiencing homelessness, strengthening partnerships with local organizations, participating in community events, and increasing presence in trusted spaces could help close those gaps. So overall, increasing awareness among those groups is critical steps forward to ensure that those most impacted by discrimination know about and can access the resources available to them. Next slide, please. So our recommendations from these findings. So based on the findings, there are several key recommendations to help increase the sense of belonging in Salem. It's important to continue prioritizing belonging, especially in groups like people experiencing homelessness, Latinx, community members who report lower levels of connections. One major opportunity is to improve communications about community event spaces and foster connection like cultural events, volunteer opportunities, and community centers. Increasing awareness through local media, social media, and other outreach can help more residents get involved. Aligning with existing efforts like the Community Health Improvement Plan is also important. The HRC can support and help expand programs that are already focused on increasing belonging. Targeted outreach is also a key, especially for people experiencing homelessness and Latinx communities. This includes building stronger partnerships with community organizations, improving access resources like translation and legal support, creating more opportunities for engagement. There is also a need of increased cultural responsive outreach to Pacific Islander communities and ensure their voices are included in community efforts. In a more broad view, the HRC can strengthen its impact by focusing on anti-discrimination efforts in high-impact spaces, expanding partnerships, and increasing awareness of available services. And then lastly, we wanted to share survey results back with the community is critical. People want to know their voices are heard and that their feedback leads to some actions. Thank you.
Thank you all for that very thorough presentation and just the work that all of you put into just fielding the survey, but then also analyzing the data and the thought and the care that you put into both the comprehensive report as well as this this overview slideshow presentation. I do want to open the floor to fellow commissioners and guests joining us either in person or live to provide comments, questions, or feedback. Commissioner Lara Mitkiff.
Thank you, Robert. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for this wonderful presentation, and Marianne, your continued partnership. This is my last year on the commission. I think my second term ends in December, and it's been wonderful to see this partnership evolve over the years, especially those years where I was involved in really helping plan it with Marianne. So I'm really grateful that this is, to echo Linnell's comments, something that we take seriously, and it does have an impact. And so I always begin by thanking you for your service to the city and to the communities here in Salem, because the work that you've done over the last term does have an impact on people's lives. And so really grateful for your work. And Marianne, a particular thank you for taking a moment for all of us to sit with the written comment. I thought that was really, really valuable. And Linnell, this commission would not be the same without your advocacy. So thank you for all your work. I think I don't have a lot of questions at this time, but I wanted to maybe comment on three things that I didn't hear mentioned in the presentation, because I had a chance to review the packet beforehand. We have a couple of we've had so many conversations in the last couple of years about themes that relate directly to the content of this survey, and I among so many other things, I think this survey allows for us to really sit thoroughly with some of those questions that inform public conversations. And I want to just highlight maybe three points that I thought were valuable to just get out there for the public record. One is around the sense of safety downtown. And there's quite a bit of rhetoric around downtown feeling particularly unsafe. I'll leave it to folks at home to think about why that might be. But I really wanted to highlight that most people do feel a sense of safety downtown. In fact, a strong majority of people, even among those who were subsampled, except for people experiencing homelessness. And I think it was notable that only 25% of people experiencing homelessness reported feeling somewhat or strongly safe downtown, and only 5% of that 25 strongly agreed with the sentiment of feeling safe downtown. I think that is one of the main takeaways for leaders and community leaders and elected leaders alike, and for this commission as we sit with the results of this survey, this wonderful survey. The other two things I wanted to just briefly mention, while national origin and language and race were not the highest scoring among people who reported experiencing or witnessing a discrimination on a daily basis, I did want to just note from page 17 of in my version of the document, page 17, that 77% of Latinos reported witnessing discrimination on a monthly or weekly or daily basis. So when you combine the monthly, weekly, daily, in terms of what people are seeing or reporting seeing in their community, that's an extremely high number. That it's over 3 in 4 Latinos. And I think one thing that we noted from that feedback from that community in particular was the intensifying campaigns of ICE and federal agents in our community, which council has responded to, and we've been a part of that response. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight, again for the record, that a pretty dramatic drop in a sense of community among people experiencing homelessness and Latinos over the last 12-month period. I wrote it down by hand, so I may be wrong. I'm not looking at it on the report, but a 49% decrease among a sense of community among those experiencing homelessness, and a 33% decrease among a sense of community among Latinos in the general community. And so I appreciate giving me a few minutes to maybe foreground some of those in addition to all the wonderful kind of synthetic commentaries that you all have made tonight, as further examples of just how valuable these data are and what we might do with them. We all at the end of this process, usually in the late summer, early fall, the commission makes a pretty lengthy report to council. City council receives some version of the packet that you submitted for us tonight as well. And so, again, it really does inform our conversations over the course of the year. And I close by thanking you again for all of your efforts. Appreciate it.
Can I make a few comments in response?
Yes, please go ahead.
Commissioner Lara Midkiff, thank you. And thank you so much for your involvement over the past few years with the survey. I mean, how much time have you spent doing translations and really helping us think through how to frame these questions in a way that works, not just in English, but works also in Spanish and for Spanish speakers. So that's been great. And I really love just, you go through this presentation and for you to just say like, hey, here's 3 things that really stand out that I want to think about and highlight. The second one that you talked about, and safety, yes, love it. And we should definitely talk more about that. But I just wanted to mention the frequency question. The first year that we did this survey, we asked, how frequently do you witness and how frequently do you experience? And the smallest increment of time, my recollection is it was a month, like, once a month, once every 3 to 6 months, once a year. And the data came back and it was like overwhelmingly marked a month, at least a month. And we were like, we need to ask in smaller increments. And it was kind of a big aha moment for me to say, okay, like this isn't just an experience that's once a month or once a year. Like, Linnell, when we're taking the survey to the streets and I say to people, how often does that happen? It's like every day, all the time. And, the bar chart there, experiencing discrimination on the basis of race, people are going to tell me the same thing every day. That, I hear stories about people being in the grocery store and seeing a look or someone clutches their purse and they're just like, come on, what? Like, and that's happening on a regular basis here in our city. And so I think that frequency question, both in terms of witnessing and in terms of experiencing, is important to sit with, because it's not just an event or a big, there was this big to-do and that was discrimination, but just the microaggressions and the bias that comes through in day-to-day interactions. And we see that in the data here. I also wanted to comment on the change in sense of community. And Chris, if it's easy for you to pull up that slide, there's the one with the general population with the blue bars and the green. And then so if you go up, like maybe 5 slides. You're doing great. A couple more. One more. So we asked in the past 12 months, has your sense of community basically increased, decreased, or stayed the same? And for the general population in the Pacific Islander, those bar charts, like from a statistician's perspective, those are really tidy, like bell curves, right? Like that middle bar is the tall one and the tails drop off pretty quick and they're pretty even. And so this like, hey, yeah, like my experience this year was a lot like my experience last year, and I feel pretty connected. For these populations, I mean, it's less than half that's in the middle, but those are pretty standard bar charts. If you scroll down to the next slide, the shape of these charts is like shockingly different. For people experiencing homelessness, I mean, that decreased a lot. It's almost just a straight line down. You have half are telling us that their sense of community has decreased a lot in the past year. When you look at the bar chart for the Latino community members, it looks like it wants to be a typical bell curve, right? With that middle 22 and then the ones falling away to the sides. But the decreased a lot is this huge anomaly. And I look at that data and I'm like, what is driving that? Because the shape of it, like I'm saying, for some community members in this population, it starts to look like a typical bell curve. And I think we see in the comments, you hear at your meetings, comments about ICE, concerns about immigration. We had written in comments about types of discrimination people experience on the basis of their immigration status. And I think that big 33% that feels so different and that decreased a lot really points to there are things in our community in the past year that have really damaged the sense of community for some of our Latino community members. And I don't think that's a surprise to any of you. I think that this data confirms that and really is a call to say, what do we do when we know that there's been this decrease to reverse that sense and have Salem be a safe place where people feel connected and a sense of belonging?
Thank you, Professor Bradshaw. Commissioner O'Shea.
So on that bell curve with the one that's on there with the orange, could this possibly be influenced by the idea that there's the fear of sweeps or more sweeps, and like you lose a lot when that kind of stuff happens, and the push to quote clean up and all those things? And so it's like, could that have impacted it? But otherwise, I don't know, there's so many factors in this. And so like looking over it, these are all perspectives, and how people feel like looking at you in the grocery store, clutching your purse when that's not, those kinds of things are just perception. It's not necessarily the actual truth. And I think we talked about this before a couple months ago with this. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out like what the decreased a lot on that orange is huge. And I'm just trying to think of what are things specifically. Like we can obviously point to the Latino community with that 33%. Like it's obvious, right? And what's going on in our environment and our culture right now with all of that, those issues. But I'm curious about the homeless, if you had any insight, or Linnell, you might be a good person to chime in about that.
Yeah, the chair will recognize Linnell Wilcox.
Yeah. I think the sweeps do have a big impact on that. But it's also, there are so many instances of actual violence happening to individuals who are homeless. We don't hear about many of them. I mean, there was a florist who literally says that he picks the person up if he's sleeping in his little alcove, throws him on the street, and throws his own vomit and poop on him. And there wasn't huge outrage. We have teenagers with guns threatening individuals who are homeless. They're threatening other individuals too. But there are teenagers with guns, our young adults that answered the survey conveyed a lot of fear about that and a lot of concern about that. So homeless individuals are often kind of blamed for why downtown isn't safe, but we're not talking about the other reasons downtown is not safe and how often homeless individuals are the victims of crime and threats. There was a teenager who beat an older gentleman, I think he was 67, to death. And these are not, I mean, beating to death is uncommon, but the harshness, the violence, the threats, the attacks are not rare. I had men telling me in tears that if they're sometimes sleeping outside and they've got a sleeping bag and the bars can't get out, people are pissing on them as they sleep. Now, who does that and why? But these are the stories we don't talk about much. They're uncomfortable. They make us all look bad. But this is regular life for many individuals. And when there's fewer and fewer places for people to go, we have amazing reach teams and HST teams and people doing really good work. But at Safe Sleep, we're getting calls and there's not enough beds. And the need is higher than all of the expansions we've done. So when you're already getting swept and there's no place for you to go, and now there's narrower and narrower and narrower options, of course you're not going to feel safe. But the threats are real, the violence is real, and it's horrific. So, that's the piece I have on that. And there's probably way more than I've even heard about. It takes someone trust to be able to share those really vulnerable moments. The men who shared their experiences were in tears as they told me. And then I can't talk about this anymore because how embarrassing is that? I've had women explaining that, she has gone to see a psychiatrist for mental health meds so she doesn't scream at people we can't see. But the only medication that quiets the voices in her head are medications that give you extreme diarrhea. Where do you go when you're a homeless woman and you get extreme diarrhea? She asked me, what would you do? And I thought, if my choice is screaming at people you can't see or having poop on my pants and having the shame of that, I would choose screaming at people you can't see. Luckily, we don't have those terrible choices to choose from, but the individuals we serve do. Kind of separately, and I know I'm not a member, so I want to be quick and respect everyone's time who is a member. But I wonder if one of the recommendations might be something about nothing about us without us in means of homeless individuals. And the reason that's coming up for me is we have the Harvard Bloomberg study that's focusing on livability and safety in Salem. And the city has done some surveys that didn't include targeting people who are homeless. And yet people who are homeless are being blamed often for the lack of safety downtown. So if you're going to say, we want safety and livability for all, but we're not including part of the all that are often being blamed for the lack of safety in those surveys, how do we have integrity in saying we're looking for safety and livability for all? So I would wonder if this commission might consider a recommendation that includes, when something specifically affects people who are homeless, could they be included in the surveys, even if it's a matter of calling outreach groups and saying, will you take it to the streets for us? And nothing about us without us. As they expand the Bloomberg project to other areas, Are they still going to include advocates? In theory, you can't serve on one area if you've already served on the other, but do we have advocates in Northeast and individuals who are homeless who are able to serve so that that voice is represented? You know, as well as all minority groups and all marginalized groups, but the homeless individuals, I feel like we really need to make sure to include them because they're so often blamed for the lack of safety. Sorry, thanks.
Thank you, Linnell. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Coleman.
At the slide with the heat map for locations of people experiencing discrimination. Government office or agency. It would just be nice to see if any of those responses, regardless of the category, included like the city of.
Celine, can you talk more into the mic? It's hard for us online to hear you.
That might be helpful. Yeah, I'll just start over. Sorry about that. I was bringing up the slide that had the locations of people experiencing discrimination and the locations. And I was looking at the government officer agency location and the different categories there, just wondering if any responses had City of Salem buildings. Not saying I'm trying to point fingers at any department or building, but it'd just be nice to know, I mean, outside of Salem Police Department, if there's room for improvement within other departments throughout the city.
Yeah, so that's a great question. These heat maps, and you kind of have to sit with them for a minute and think about them. The one that's on the screen right now is for witnessing. And if you don't mind scrolling to the next one. So on the witness one, I'll just comment the way that worked before you scroll is we said to people, have you witnessed or heard about discrimination in Salem in the past 12 months? If they said no, they skipped this question. If they said yes, we said, okay, how often and where? So if you look at the top, like under general population, the sample size is 332 because the 63% who said yes saw the question and the rest of them just skipped on by. So when you look under the government office or agency, those then are people who said, yes, I've witnessed. And we said, okay, mark everywhere that you've witnessed. And they could go through. And some people like marked one and kept going.
Yeah.
Some people marked every single one. So we did not specify like what government office or agency. So the way the questionnaire was fielded this time, we have no way to say, is that City of Salem? But I think it's helpful to look at that and say, okay, there is discrimination that people are witnessing there. And if you scroll to the next slide now, Chris, this is where the questionnaire gets like really complex because we do this weird branching thing.
That's the one I was talking
Yeah,
about.
this is the one you're thinking about. So now we said, have you personally experienced discrimination? The people who said no skipped this. The people who said yes, we asked them, okay, what type? On the basis of what? And if they marked age, and that was it, then we said, okay, how frequently have you experienced discrimination based on age and in what settings? But if they marked age and income and gender, they got that pair of questions for each of those. So for some people, the survey was shorter. And for some people, if they've experienced discrimination for, a variety of types of discrimination, then they got more questions. But if you look then the government office or agency, so of the people, and you were talking about income, of the people who said, I have experienced discrimination in Salem in the past 12 months on the basis of income, that's 48 people. And half of them marked that that happened in a government office or agency. And so that's, we're talking about 24 people who marked that. But it's higher on the basis of income than others. And so, if I'm sitting on the Disability Rights Task Force, there's a chart just like this in the report looking at mental disability and physical disability. And if I'm saying I want to decrease discrimination in Salem on the basis of disability, there may be some information there that's useful to say, okay, where is that happening more and where is that happening less? This chart is the 5 that were the most common: housing status, race, color, national origin, income, gender, and age.
But like all of those combined, still like 100 people.
Yeah.
And then just looking at the recommendations page, so almost the end of the presentation, it looks like you mentioned under explore, engaging in the CHIP efforts. And so would that be trying to accomplish a goal or just work with the CHIP team?
So the Willamette Health Council has done a whole big process. The CHIP is the Community Health Improvement Plan. And there's 3 big categories, one of which is a mental health and substance use. And within that, there are specific goals to belonging. And so the first step is to develop a measure, a definition of belonging with a measure. And then once that's in place, they will have funding to support belonging efforts. I happen to be quite involved in that work, so I would be a resource if you have questions. But I think that there's a lot of space for collaboration, given the work that you as a commission do around belonging, either to potentially consider if there's a commissioner that wants to participate in some of the conversations around defining what does belonging mean locally and how do we measure it. You've already sat and looked at data one attempt, or just planning ahead, looking into 2027, if there is funding available, are there, some of these recommendations, if you say, let's do a communication campaign about belonging topics, could there be funding as part of the CHIP to do something like that? Are you working with community partners who you're saying, okay, we're coming out of this survey saying there's really a need to do more belonging work in this community? Maybe you have a partner that you could make aware of that opportunity and they could apply for a grant. There's just enough overlap between what you are doing as part of this project and what they're starting to do, that we felt like it was worth flagging that as something to explore.
Okay, thank you. I definitely think there is room for collaboration there. Just continuing the efforts between the county and the city, who does the data crunching and, the focus groups and all that stuff. So, but just wanted clarity on that. And then I think that's pretty much it. With the SPD outreach, Salem Police Department outreach, is that like going out into the field or like working with the HST or just the department as a whole?
That came from the positive feedback that personal interaction is what's building trust. And I know they are doing great things, but coming out of this to say, is there a space for a conversation about what they are doing and if that could be expanded, if that's, conversation you as a commission would want to have with them, that personal interaction, it works. So if they can do more, and if they're willing, and if they have time, resources, and you want to encourage them to do it, I think having the conversation is valuable.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for the discussion. I do just want to flag that it is after 8. I do want to just take a moment to thank the students again, one last time, for all the work that you've put into the survey, and to you, Professor Bradshaw, for continuing to think of partnering with the Human Rights Commission to really field a class that allows people to analyze real data that can impact and change the communities in which they live, recreate, and work in. And so I really appreciate that continued ongoing partnership. To the students that, you know, are potentially graduating, that are graduating or have graduated, not current on the cycles, but thank you all for this project, and I hope that you continue to go out into your communities and exercise your degrees to do great things and make big changes. The communities in the world need people like you, and we're excited to see what you accomplish as the next generation of leaders. And to my commissioners, before we wrap up, we will spend quite a bit of time on this next month at our meeting. So I encourage all of you to continue looking, sit with the larger report, sit with the slide decks. If you have questions about different data trends that you want to analyze, or questions that you have, I'm sure Professor Bradshaw would be willing to answer some of those ahead of the next meeting.
Absolutely.
Glad I could volunteer you. And then just think of you know, recommendations and anything we might want to make to you know, city council, or included in our report to council based off of this information. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. This meeting is adjourned.
And thank you.